Declare the meeting open at 2 minutes past 6 o'clock. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and on behalf of the City of Vincent, pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. CEO, it looks like all people are accounted for, so we have no apologies this evening. So that means I'll turn to public question time and receiving of public statements. Hello and welcome to the council meeting. This is public question time, so we welcome you to come forward to the microphone. There's no set order, just as you like, and we do ask that you state your name, your address and the item to which you're speaking, and that you do speak for no more than 3 minutes. And please go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Cole and councillors. My name is Nick Zunis and I represent
So we move to applications for leave of absence. We have one, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. We've got one request for leave of absence, council members, from Mayor Emma Cole from the 17th of September to the 12th of October 2018 inclusive for personal reasons.
Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Move Councillor Harley, seconded Councillor Castle. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. We don't have any petitions, deputations or presentations this evening, so I'll move on to confirmation of minutes, and they are for the ordinary meeting of the 24th of July 2018. Can I please have a mover and seconder? Move Councillor Fotakis, seconded Councillor Loden. All those in favour? I declare the minutes carried. Announcements by the presiding member. I just want to quickly mention that we do have some quite key public consultations happening at the moment on our Imagine Vincent website, which is our engagement website. They are the draft strategic community plan, the 40km/h speed zone trial on local residential roads in the southernmost neighbourhoods of Vincent, and also our reconciliation action plan, in which we're striving to move to an Innovate RAP plan. So I'd really strongly encourage residents and ratepayers and visitors to the City of Vincent to have a look at those, and please take the opportunity to provide comment. Thank you. I will now move to declarations of interest.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I've received a number of disclosures of interest. The first is from Councillor Jimmy Murphy. It's an impartiality interest on item 18.1. That's the confidential item. The nature of Councillor Murphy's interest is that the owner of the Rosemount Hotel car park, FJM Properties, is a founding partner of the Town Team movement, of which Councillor Murphy is the convener. As a consequence, there may be a perception that Councillor Murphy's impartiality on the matter could be affected. Councillor Murphy has declared that he will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. The second impartiality interest I've received is also from Councillor Jimmy Murphy in relation to item 9.6, the proposed small bar in Beaufort Street, Mount Lawley. The extent of Councillor Murphy's interest in this matter is that the representative is Urbanista, the applicant's representative is Urbanista Town Planning, of which Bianca Sandry is a director. Ms Sandry sits on the Town Team Movement Board, of which Councillor Murphy is the convener. As a consequence, there may be a perception that Councillor Murphy's impartiality on the matter could be affected. Councillor Murphy has declared that he will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. I've received a financial interest disclosure from Councillor Jimmy Murphy in relation to agenda item 9.1, which is the change of use in Scarborough Beach Road, Mount Hawthorn. Councillor Murphy has disclosed that the extent of his interest in this matter is that the owner of the property, which is the Mez Hawaiian, is a sponsor of the Victoria Park Summer Street Party, which is run by Councillor Murphy's company Upbeat Events. Councillor Murphy is not seeking any approval from Council to participate in the debate or remain in chambers or vote on the matter when it is discussed. And finally, I've received a disclosure of financial or indirect financial interest from Councillor Josh Toppelberg in relation to item 9.6, the proposed change of use to small bar. Councillor Toppelberg has declared that the extent of the interest is that his business has a current financial relationship with the architect for the development. Councillor Toppelberg is not seeking any approval from Council to participate in the debate or to remain in chambers or vote on the matter. And I might just, through you, Mayor Cole, just note for the record that agenda item 9.8 has been withdrawn by administration and is not to be discussed at tonight's council meeting.
Thank you, CEO. So I'll just go around the table to council members. So in addition to the items that have already been raised by members of the public gallery and those where there is a financial interest, if there are any further items that council members wish to bring forward, so I'll go to Councillor Gondaszewski.
10.3, please.
And Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you. Item 9.2. That's all. Thanks.
Councillor Fotakis. Councillor Loden.
10.1.
Councillor Murphy.
12.2, please.
Councillor Harley.
Nothing from me, Matt.
Councillor Castle.
10.2, please.
10.2. Councillor Hallett. 14.1. Yep. Okay. We also just need to bring forward 11.2 because that's the Audit Committee meeting report.
Through you, Mayor Cole, council members, members of the gallery and anyone streaming the meeting via the internet, I'll just read through now the following agenda items which council will adopt en bloc, exactly as per the officer recommendation printed in the agenda papers this evening. So council will now be considering adoption en bloc of the officer recommendations relating to items 9.3, 10.2, 11.1.
Excuse me, CEO. 10.2 was pulled out.
Apologies. I'll start again. Items 9.3, 11.1, 11.3, 11.4, 11.5, 12.1 and 13.1. Noting that confidential item 18.1 will be discussed separately by council behind closed doors.
Thank you. Can I have a mover and seconder for the en bloc items? Move Councillor Toppelberg, seconded Councillor Murphy. All those in favour? I declare the en bloc items carried. Thank you. So just to explain, the way that we now deal with the agenda items is that we first go to items that were raised by members of the public gallery, so there will be a little bit of jumping around, and then after that we will continue to move through the agenda. So the first item that was raised this evening was 9.4, and that is number 498 Fitzgerald Street, North Perth, proposed alterations and additions to existing multiple dwellings, removal of landscaping to include car bay. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item? Move Councillor Gondaszewski. Seconded Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, in this application we're considering a request to have an additional visitors bay. The reasons that have been put forward for the request relate to the visibility. A request to try and improve visibility of the visitors bays by placing a bay within the front setback area. From the site visit today, I also understand that there is a desire to solve some issues for residents by offering 2 residential bays for the 2-bedroom townhouse and to separate these bays from a single bay that would then be allocated to the 1-bedroom dwelling. I can absolutely appreciate the desire of the applicants to address these issues, but I think as council we essentially have to have a broader view and a community level view. I think from my visit to the site today, I did observe that, in my opinion, the visitors bay in their current location are reasonably legible. And from my perspective, that wayfinding may well be improved by some additional signage. But essentially, in terms of placing the visitors bay within the front setback area, in order to make it to clearly demarcate it as a visitors bay, it would essentially have to be stripped vegetation and planting zones at ground level. And I understand that there is within the site some trellises that would support creepers growing up walls. There is certainly no green walls. I think that the plantings on the site are attractive and certainly do contribute to amenity. And I guess from my perspective, in terms of the reasons for refusal, the first relates to the increase in hard stand and the resultant lot of deep soil planting, and I consider this would have a negative impact on public amenity. And then I think also the second relates to the potential incursion of parked vehicles into the future road reservation with road widening. I accept these as valid grounds for refusal, and I'm supportive of the officer recommendation in this regard.
Councillor Murphy.
Thank you for that, Councillor Kondrashevsky. I don't have any other further comments. I support the officer recommendation for refusal.
Councillors, any further comments in relation to this item? Councillor Toppelberg.
Just a question through you to the Acting Director. Is the current landscaping on site in the area where at the front of the property where the visitors' bay is proposed, is the landscaping that's on site currently in accordance with the landscaping plan?
Through you, Mayor Cole, at this current time, the landscaping is not in accordance with the approved plans.
Councillors, look, in addition to the comments that Councillor Kondrashevsky has made, which I do agree with, I do also feel that the fact that the development currently has 14 car bays on site, which is more than required, is another factor that has affected my support for the officer recommendation. There is an amendment that's available should council members wish to move it, but I just wanted to state that that is also part of the thinking for me in terms of the reasons for refusal. Councillor Hallett.
I'd like to propose an amendment.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fotakis.
Not a different one.
Sorry, did I make an assumption? It was the timing. Would you like to go ahead, Councillor Hallett?
Just to concur with the Mayor's comments that there are 14 bays on site. Only 2 of those are visitor bays. It's more than enough, I feel, for the number of premises, and so I think this should be added as an additional reason for refusal.
Councillor Fotakis, do you wish to speak? Does anyone wish to speak to the amendment? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour of the amendment? I declare it carried. Oh, sorry. All those against? Councillor Toppelberg voting against. I declare it carried. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further comments in relation to this item? I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare the officer recommendation carried. Thank you. The next item that was raised in the public gallery was number 266 Lord Street, Perth. Additions, 2 car stackers to existing motor vehicle, boat or caravan sales. Can I have a mover and seconder? Councillor Toppelberg moving, seconded Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. I just, as a principle, I think that this is perhaps the future of vehicle sales. I think the idea of having thousands of square metres of open land where cars are parked and people wander through, I think is, and certainly in an urban area, I think that that's got a very limited time left for the way in which people purchase vehicles. That being said, I think that, and whilst I understand the plans and I understand what's proposed, I think that how this proposal actually has a sense of place and fits in with its surroundings is let down very much by the information that's been provided. I think that it's very difficult to get a perspective of what's trying to be achieved other than to stick a giant steel structure of 6 stories in the rear of this property adjacent to residences. So, look, I think that given the heights that are allowable on Lord Street, it's not outside the bounds of possibility that something of this nature somewhere within that street would be possible, but the current DA that's before us is not something that I can support, and I'm happy with the officer recommendation.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. Similarly to Councillor Toppelberg, I agree. This is, I guess, too high in my view, but I do like this concept, and I think it is something that we will potentially see more of in the future. But it's too significant a departure from the particularly around height for me.
Councillors, any further comments? In relation to the height, it is over 19.5 metres permitted in this location, with one of the stackers being 22.2 metres high. But I think it's also just the presentation with the mechanics of the car stackers just being open. There was feedback from the design review panel, and I think that their massing diagram on page 149 of the agenda is very telling. I think that the height is too much, and I think that if we are to entertain car stackers of this nature in these sorts of locations, which residents rightly point out is not an industrial area, then we do need to look at height, screening, etc., to make this some kind of remotely acceptable built form in these types of areas. So I support the officer recommendation. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Next item is 9.6, number 559 Beaufort Street, Mount Lawley, change of use from shop to small bar. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item? Move Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be upfront. I think this application can be accommodated, so I won't be supporting the recommendation for refusal. I think that there is, and I'll get to it if we get there, I think that there is capacity to perhaps have a more nuanced approach to parking in this area, and that's the grounds on which the refusal has been put forward, and so I have an alternative should we get to that point, but yes, I won't be supporting the recommendation as it stands.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Gontaszewski. I'm not unknown to members of council. I'm not a big fan of increasing the number of alcohol outlets in the city, and particular when we're talking about some of the town centres and the number of small bars. But I think this particular one offers a good daytime street frontage, and I think the parking issues are something that we need to perhaps revisit, and in particular in terms of the alternative, I think there's some good measures in there to address the concerns around parking in that area. So I will be not supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillors, Councillor Hawley.
Thank you, Mayor. I also won't be supporting the officer's recommendation, and I'm assuming you're going to move your proposed alternative amendment very shortly. I guess I want to raise a few points, so I'm on the record as if anyone's watching out there, if anyone who wants to know why I'm not supporting it. A number of years ago, we sat as a council on an adaptive reuse, a very good adaptive reuse, as it turned out, on Beaufort Street. From memory, and I don't have the papers in front of me, but there were 0 car bays attached with that. There were a number of outlets that in there, including alcohol outlets, and part of the to and froing, we ended up having a laneway in there as well, which was a good outcome. I think that there's a fundamental issue with combining the need for car parking with an alcohol or liquor outlet, a licensed premises. And I admit, while not everyone obviously drinks when they go to a licensed premises, for me, actually the linkage between them is a worrying one, and one that I've given a lot more thought to over recent months as these applications come before us, and one that I'm going to continue to give more attention to. Particularly where we've got a proposal where we've got an adaptive reuse. If this was a new application before us, that is, it was a developer's application to ground zero and to build a development here, mixed or otherwise, then we would be talking lots of parking, the need to build that into a new development. But I just don't see, in this case, based on previous decisions we've made on Beaufort Street, but also based on the fact that there has been an offer of some cash in lieu, I don't think it's reasonable albeit that I understand that it creates issues with our policy to have $100,000 cash in lieu. And yes, there are problems with increasingly the amount of alcohol outlets on Beaufort Street, and this is there are challenges in that in terms of the tipping towards a nighttime economy at the expense of a daytime economy, and we will all have to get our heads around that as well as businesses, etc., because you need a daytime economy and footfall through that area so that people even know your bar's there. So I think it's applaudable that there's going to be an activation of that front space, and hopefully there'll be more applications similar to that in the future. So we've got an active space during the day and a nighttime economy as well. So I won't be supporting the officer's recommendation, and I'll look forward to supporting the alternative recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. We will have to first debate and vote on the officer recommendation. So are there further councillors? Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm echoing a lot of the sentiments of everyone who's spoken today. I also won't be supporting this recommendation. I think the point that Councillor Harley has raised is really important to me. I'm really not comfortable with the messaging that we're sending about the connection between small bars and driving and parking, and I realise that's something that is embedded into our policy but perhaps needs to be revisited given the outcomes that we're seeing here. And I think we should be looking at other ways to achieve the balance in the town centres that we are seeking. I also agree that having a dual use of daytime and nighttime use is something that we have been encouraging in our town centres, and it's a way that we have actually suggested to small businesses as to diversify their income. So I think that's not something that we should penalise these applicants for. So I look forward to the alternative recommendation as well if we get to that point.
Councillors, any further comments on this, on the officer recommendation? Okay. I'll put it. All those in favour of the officer recommendation, which is to refuse the application? All those against? I declare it lost. So we will now go to the alternate, which is on the green. Councillor Gondaszewski, do you wish to move the alternate? Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Harley.
Thank you. Look, the crux of this, I'm not sure if it's appearing on the screen, that's great, is essentially to approve the small bar with a maximum of 100 patrons, the standard sort of hours of operation relating to small bars. Acknowledgement that an acoustic report that has been provided will need to be implemented, and that management plan in relation to acoustics. Probably the, I guess the big ticket item in this is relating to requiring a contribution of cash in lieu to be paid to the city for a shortfall of 8 car bays prior to the commencement of development, or by entering into a written agreement to pay that, and updating the parking management plan. And then also an additional of bicycle bays within the Beaufort Street verge. I think it's given that we're sort of at this point with our policy where there is sort of a performance-based criteria, I thought that it would be somewhat useful perhaps to come to where I'd landed on the calculation. I think what we've got here is on the basis of our policy, the table in our policy, we had a 23-bay assessment of car parking. However, it is at the discretion of the decision maker to consider a number of factors in relation to making a determination as to the actual impact of the development on parking. I think that in terms of my decision making, there's been, I note high frequency bus route, the availability of parking within public car parks in the locality, a taxi rank, and obviously the increasing use of rideshare services. We've got the bicycle parking, obviously, as part of the condition, and also that there is some availability of street parking in the location. We obviously see that there is not the fact that there is parking restrictions in the neighbouring residential streets would indicate that that parking is at a premium in the location, and so I don't accept that that there is no impact in terms of parking in relation to the development, or that the impact of the parking can be fully accommodated. We have, so from my perspective, I've sort of considered those factors, and I would say that an assessment of 13 bays associated with the development, but I note that there is a sort of an approved shortfall of 5 bays already in operation for the site, leading to the 8 bays. And so, look, I mean, you know, obviously there's 8 bays. 8 bays cannot be accommodated on the site. There's no reciprocal parking agreement. I don't feel that this is an undesirable development, and so the parking I don't feel should be an impediment, and so I think that that meets the requirement for cash in lieu. So that's sort of my decision making on that. In relation to the land use, again, I agree that that this is a move away from retail on the site. We have but the retention of the shop in the front part of the site is important. I agree. I think that retaining a small tenancy on Beaufort Street is likely to be positive. Somewhat fortuitously, perhaps, I have visited other places in the world where bars are successfully combined with other ventures, manicures, vintage clothes, and even one that was tucked away behind a toy shop. Somewhat, you know, anyway. But and I think. So I think that this is something that where we could actually see a small tenancy. I believe that the proposal is for a barber shop. I think that they could make a go of that. And retain an active frontage to Beaufort Street, while also having an additional offering as the nighttime economy at the rear. So that's my grounds for putting forward the alternative. And yes, I hope that other councillors will support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I support the alternative recommendation. I obviously support the cash in lieu a compromise, and it obviously is a compromise. Just to note, it is payable over 5 years. I think that the amount of 8 car bays cash in lieu is just the cost of doing business, and it's an entirely a reasonable amount over a 5-year period. So hopefully there is no kind of argy-bargy on that. I think that there are, just generally speaking, we do have some challenges on Beaufort Street. And as I mentioned earlier in the debate, it is important for people coming into this area to understand that we need a daytime economy as well. And combining the two, I think, is certainly is the way of the future. I'm not so sure about the toy shop and bar, Councillor, but a laundromat and a bar I think would work quite well. But anyway, I'm sure that there's lots of ideas floating around there. So hopefully we will see a few more ideas come to the fore. So I support the alternative.
Councillors? Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, I'm a supporter of this proposed establishment. I think it'll be a great addition to Beaufort Street. I love the idea of having a daytime use, which is exactly what we need on the strip. I like your car parking calculation. I would probably tend to be even more generous. I'd be open if anyone wanted to go lower to the 32,000 mark, but I think 43 can work, hopefully. So yeah, support. Thanks for preparing it. It's great.
Councillors? Councillor Fotakis?
I like the idea of this bar. I think it's different, it's quirky, and I think it fits with Beaufort Street. Like your calculations there, Councillor Gontaszewski. I was erring on them being a little bit touch on the high side until I saw the 5-year arrangement, which I think is more than reasonable. I agree with Councillor Harley on that. So for a number of reasons I will be supporting the alternative.
Councillors? Just some brief comments. I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but I think that this is an interesting approach to small bars, and I'd love to see more of it, because I think that one of the issues we have identified is that where small bars wholly take over retail, it does and can have an impact on daytime activity on our in our town centres and on our thriving activity corridors, and we have seen a lot of change. So I think this was a really clever way of keeping that daytime interaction whilst having a speakeasy concept behind the barbershop. So I really welcome that. I think that this has pretty much been outlined, but the current policy, I think we've flagged we'd like to have another look at it. But I think that in terms of the discretion that's allowed in that policy, it does actually talk about that in clause 1.2, where it lists the reasons why council may wish to exercise judgment to determine the proposal, and it talks about adequate parking, but if not, transport, proximity to transport infrastructure, bike parking, which the applicant's been able to satisfy, alternative transport modes, this being on Beaufort Street where there is a high frequency bus route, not to mention the other forms of transport mentioned by Councillor Kontoshevsky. The cash in lieu has been offered, and council's, it still remains open, but there is an amount put forward in the alternate motion, and the applicant has also provided a car parking management plan. So there are grounds for council to exercise this discretion, and I think that this would be a good outcome for Beaufort Street, so I do support the alternate motion put forward. Councillors, are there any further comments? Okay, I'll put the alternate motion. All those in favour? I declare it carried unanimously with Councillor Toppelberg out of the room. Thank you. That takes us to item 9.7, which is 209 Vincent Street, West Perth. This is a State Administrative Tribunal Section 31 reconsideration, proposed 4 group dwellings. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Moved Councillor Toppelberg. Seconded Councillor Kontoshevsky.
Thank you. I think, look, I know the applicant, I know, made contact with elected members. I did have a chat to him before he sent that email 10 days ago, and then last week turned up on the Tuesday and didn't get much in response because I think there weren't that many questions, because unfortunately that's the way that the system is in terms of our council briefings. But for me, that's because I'm largely happy with what's there. For me, the vast improvement is that the change in the accessibility in the parking is, whilst it was functional for me, it's mostly the usability of the outdoor space. That was a key issue for me, and I think that has been well addressed. I do think, and it'll be interesting to see in the future whether the space that's currently proposed to be occupied by the car parking and the space that's been left between further back than the required setback from the laneway. I would imagine at some point in the future in that part of the world that'll probably become its own lot. It is a fairly significant piece of land that is vacant or at the rear, but I suppose on the other side it's I guess that provides some comfort for the neighbours on the other side at Florence Street who do have concerns, and I guess whilst the applicant did speak in relation to it, it's important to note that that's very much in the planning context, that the overshadowing experienced or the overlooking what's experienced in the real world or the perception of it is different to what's defined in planning, and the setbacks certainly are sufficient enough, and that orientation and that setback of the building line does not result in any overshadowing or overlooking in pure planning terms. As for how it may relate to any privacy concerns, that's something that I guess will need to be addressed on site by future residents of this proposal and the neighbours to the north. So I'm supportive of it. Appreciate I think it's a really good result. I don't know how much of it was the will of the applicant or the SAT process itself, but it's good to see something that's not just a few tweaks and actually a redesign that takes into consideration the concerns that were raised, and I'm happy to support the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Topper. Councillor Kontoshevsky.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just through you to the Acting Director of Development Services, just in relation to the comments from the gallery in relation to the upper floor setback and overshadowing, and also the overlooking across Florence Lane into the neighbouring property. If you could just provide some additional, I guess I note that there is compliance in relation to both of these, but just if you could perhaps provide some explanation in relation to the planning framework for both of those.
Through you, Mayor Cole, in terms of the privacy issue across Florence Place, as referenced previously by the applicant, the setback from the habitable room windows at the rear of the property towards Florence Place, the separation distance is in excess of 13 metres, or approximately 13 metres, which is very comfortably compliant with the residential design codes, which sets a minimum standard lateral separation distance, which is much less than the 13 metres proposed in this instance. In terms of the overshadowing, you'll note from the plans that the block runs largely north-south, and with the shadow being cast to the south, the shadow that's being created by this development will largely be cast upon itself and the carport area to the back. So, again, referencing back to the residential design codes, the proposal as it sits before us is comfortably compliant with overshadowing and visual privacy.
Look, that's fine. I'm happy to support the officer recommendation in this regard. Obviously, yes, it will be once built that the neighbouring residents can see, but what the impact is in relation to any overlooking. But from the perspective of decision making, the application is compliant in these regards, and so I'm happy to support the officer recommendation.
Councillors, comments? No further comments? Look, just briefly to say that I agree with Councillor Toppelberg. It's good to see a genuine redesign come back through the SAT process, and that issue that was of concern to many council members and the access on Vincent Street has been dealt with, amongst other things. I think the design is better overall as well, which is good to see. And as mentioned now a couple of times in relation to the issues raised by, by Katrina, a neighbour, given that those matters are compliant, there's not any space for council to address those particular issues, but it does remain open to the applicant to look at landscaping if they wish. So unless there are any further comments, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. And the last item that was raised in the public gallery this evening was item 14.1, notice of motion, Councillor Dan Loden, transparency of rates spend in the budget. Moved by Councillor Loden, yes. Seconded by Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you, Mayor. This notice of motion came about to help us provide some additional clarity to residents around the details of the rates. The City did a great job with the most recent rates in terms of providing that visual and graphical breakdown for residents. However, I'm really keen to see some additional information be available to residents, so particularly providing that information via a separate page on the website that they can sort of get in there and scrutinise some more of the detail. And the second part of this is around providing some additional information and conversation with Council about how that is presented. There is a little bit of an issue with the most recent rates statement around it might convey the impression around how much we spend in different areas of rates, but there are obviously income sources that come in as well that would offset some of those costs that we've outlined in that as well. So it's helping to provide some clarity there as well. Thank you.
Councillor Toppelberg.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I had some... it's pretty simple, and I think that anything that increases the visibility over what we're doing and explains that in a clearer way is a positive thing. I'd had some time to think in the last half hour about what was the worst budget that we've ever put together in terms of community information, and I guess what for me sits alongside that as I suppose as a counter to that is the fact that what we do have, which we haven't had perhaps in those years prior to 2014, is a corporate business plan and a very explicit guide to our administration, which is publicly available and consulted upon. And beyond that, there's no information that is hidden. I do accept that people are looking for more, that they may be looking for more within the budget process, or their rates notice, or to be able to get a clear visual representation, which is the point of the notice of motion. But as a broad principle, I would fairly say the opposite, that we probably had this year the most comprehensive budget process that we've had in our time at Vincent, and the clarity between administration and elected members, and how that has translated through the community submissions process has been, to my mind, among the best that we've had. And yeah, I'm quite comfortable and appreciate Councillor Oden bringing this forward. I think it's valuable. I know that he tried in a number of ways to get it just to make a magical appearance, but that's what notices of motion are there for. So it's a good move.
Councillors? Look, I'll just add that, you do have a budget document that is quite a lengthy, detailed document, and then we have our rates notice. So I think it is a really good idea to have something in between for those community members that do want to have that overview that's a little bit more than what's provided in the rates notice. And just to add to Councillor Toppelberg's comments, I think that there are many differences in our budgets these days, that they are in surplus, that we have our community budget submissions process, and I think that they are more open, engaging than they ever have been before. So I think we should be very proud of our budget process, and I know that we're already talking about improvements that can be made in our next annual budget now that we have the fantastic skills of our new Director of Corporate Services, who has brought fresh eyes to this process. So onwards and upwards, and always open to improvements in this space. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Thank you. So I'll now go back to the beginning of the agenda and work our way through sequentially now that we've dealt with all of the items that were raised by members of the public gallery. So the next item is 9.1, number 148 to 158, Scarborough Beach Road, Mount Hawthorn, change of use from office retail to educational establishment. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Gondaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of this officer recommendation, and it's good to see the changes that have been made since the briefing last week that bring the hours of operation for this business into line with the shopping centre. I did have one question just for clarification at point 1.2. It currently reads a maximum number of persons attending the educational establishment at any one time should be limited to 31 persons. Can the Director of Development Services clarify that that means including students and it's at any time during those hours of operation?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, I can confirm both aspects. That the 31 is inclusive of students and it applies at any given time.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Councillors, Councillor Gondaszewski.
Oh, look, I just wanted to say this is another, we're sort of seeing a couple on the agenda in relation to the move or change of use in relation to moving from retail away. I think this is very complementary to the existing retail uses within the Mount Hawthorn area. I think that this is likely to make good use of somewhat challenging space and actually will bring people into the area to eat, drink, be merry and shop. And in that regard, I'm very supportive. Again, I appreciate the changes that have been made and supportive of this one.
Councillors? Well, look, I'll just make a couple of comments that I do agree. I think that when I first looked at the address, my interest was where was this shop located. I don't know if any other Mount Hawthorn residents can correct me if I'm wrong, but in my over many years of the use of the mez, my understanding is that it's been an art studio for a long time, and I'm not quite sure the previous use to that, but I can't recall it ever operating as a retail shop. It's in a very tucked away place on the way to the lift. It's really more of a service area, so in terms of its visibility and being an active shop front, it's certainly not that, and hasn't been the case for many years. And I do agree with Councillor Gontaszewski that this is a good complementary business, a place where you can take your children to Kumon, and while they are there you can shop, you can sit in the cafe, you can go for a walk along the strip. I think it sounds fantastic. I'm thinking of enlisting my children into Kumon as a result of this. That was a joke. Just to be very clear, that was an absolute joke, and I have no intention of doing that before a conflict of interest issue arises. I do support this change of use. I think that you do need to delve deeper when you see these change of uses appear on the agenda, and in this case I'm very comfortable that this is, as Councillor Gontaszewski says, a very good complementary use to the existing retail, not only at the Mez but on the High Street and town centre of Mount Hawthorn. Are there any further comments? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Just waiting for Councillor Murphy to surface. Thank you, Councillor Murphy. We're now at item 9.2. 1 of 226 Oxford Street, Leederville, change of use from shop to restaurant, cafe, brackets, unauthorised existing use. Councillor Toppelberg moved and seconded by Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a question in relation to the clarification of condition 1.4, which is about the maximum. So I guess my question is, my assumption is that the plans that we've been provided with on page 37, given that it's an existing use and not an intended use, is that the seats that are currently outside the premises are existing, so the alfresco dining. So question is, well, I think I have the answer to it, but I'll ask it anyway. Given that there is no existing approval for the use, I assume there's no existing permit for the alfresco dining. Would that be correct?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that is correct.
So just from a, whether you call it a fairness principle or otherwise, the limiting of the number of patrons to 25, was that the request of the applicant, and are they aware that that was to exclude people outside of the premises, or are they currently operating with the 25 seats inside and the 4 that are shown outside? I'll ask that first. Was the 25 the request of the applicant, or is that as per the plans that have been provided to us?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the number 25 is at the request of the applicant, so they are absolutely aware of it.
And are they aware that it was to exclude alfresco? I know, aside from the parklet, but the actual alfresco, are they aware that that was intended to be capped, including the alfresco?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that has been communicated to the applicant. The number 25 includes any people sitting within the facility and in the abutting alfresco area.
Is there any feedback from the applicant in relation to that? I just don't want to have to, given the process up until now, to have to force potentially them to come back. Were they aggrieved or were they understanding? Is that reflective of what their current operation is?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the applicant was accepting of that recommended condition on the basis that they had, as part of their application, sought to obtain an approval that did not incorporate a condition related to cash in lieu for a car park in short form.
Given that, I will craft an advice note to that effect, so that that acceptance of no cash in lieu in exchange for that it runs together with the application for any future similar use on the site.
Are you moving an amendment?
No, I'm letting the seconder speak while I think of how to word it.
Thank you. Councillor Castle.
I don't really have anything to add because I was going to ask the same question as Councillor Toppelberg, but I can keep talking so that he has time to craft his advice note and then move it when I finish talking.
You don't need to do that, Councillor Castle. An amendment can come forward at any time. I do appreciate your filibustering, but we can keep moving with the debate and the amendment can come forward at any time. Councillors, we have a requirement to fill some time. Would anyone like to chat about this application? Councillor Gonchevsky.
I have just a question, and I asked this at the briefing in relation to what's proposed versus what's in the applicant's documentation, but it does say, and I'm very happy to be corrected by the Acting Director of Development Services, that the proposal is that 2 vehicle bays are provided, and that's on page 30. And then on page, I'm going to get there. On page 39, it says there are parking bays at the back of the premises in where 3 are for La Fuente. And then in the parking allocation table in the parking management plan framework on page 40, it says the total number of car parking spaces is 3. And I would be grateful just for reaffirmation of that in clarification.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I can reconfirm that there are a total of 2 bays allocated to this tenancy. I think the error on the part of the applicant in this case is a misunderstanding as to the status of a 3rd bay, which is effectively allocated for the site manager or the strata manager. It is not explicitly allocated to any individual tenancy, but is, as I understand it, commonly available throughout the day, but long story short, the bay is not allocated to the subject site.
And then just a question in relation to sort of what we discussed in the earlier application in relation to parking calculations and waiving of cash in lieu and so on. Just to get this correct, that the calculation from our table within our parking policy would indicate that a development of this nature would have a parking impact of 7 bays, and the proposal is for 2 bays. However, due to the consideration of available street parking, like on Richmond Street, the proximity to public transport and, well, there's no bike parking, so there's cash in there, but the assessment is that those factors would reduce the car parking impact to 2 bays, and that is why there is no proposal for that parking impact to be addressed either on site through reciprocal parking or with cash in lieu. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that is all correct.
It's through you, Chair. So can I just clarify something? And Councillor Topberg, I'm sure, will address this in what he's doing now. Can I just clarify so I understand what's being talked about? Is there are 25 seats currently within the restaurant, and there's 4, and it's existing, so it's been in operation for a while. Can I just ask, if we approve this with 25 seats, for example, and Alfresco is not part of it, can the applicant come back and just apply for that Alfresco online? Through you, Mayor, to the Director.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, the application could be lodged for an Alfresco permit. I'll direct you to recommended condition on the development approval 1.4, which is the maximum number of patrons for the restaurant cafe, inclusive of any alfresco dining areas, shall be 25. So it is incumbent on if this is in fact approved, the applicant would have to comply with that 25.
So I'm asking a more general question then in regards to that. So when council approves an eating house, just say 20, 10, whatever, you've done your car parking calculations, your toilet calculations and all the rest of it. When an applicant comes along and then does an online alfresco, Are you saying that we go back and then recalculate and double check that everything's still okay with regards to toilets, parking, etc., etc.? Is that actually what happens at the moment?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think I understand exactly what Councillor Harley's asking, and my recollection of when the various kind of questions and gateways were constructed for the online self-assessment and self-approval of Alfresco permits, one of the stop-go questions is, do you have a condition on an existing land use approval that limits the number of patrons within or directly adjacent to your tenancy? I'm quite sure to contemplate that exact scenario, that limitation was included such that it would put the onus on the applicant to check their own approval condition to make sure that there wasn't anything in their planning approval that they might be then inadvertently contravening if they then go and set up an alfresco area. Importantly, though, what that means is that without getting too much into the detail, so it's entirely council's prerogative to apply a condition of this nature. If someone were to then be blocked from going through the self-certification process that we've set up online, that simply means then that they would have to apply to either get the licence or the permit granted by administration separately, because they wouldn't be able to do that themselves online, and most likely it would also require then them to submit an application to amend whatever condition of their planning approval it is that introduces that prohibition. But the further complicating factor there is that alfresco area always occurs, or virtually always occurs, within a road reserve. The road reserve is, from memory, unzoned land under our planning scheme, in which case the land use classifications and the permissibility arrangements of the scheme don't automatically apply. But that's not to say that council still can't, in dealing with the land use, impose conditions that are generally within the curtilage of that area.
Okay, thank you. I think we might have a few problems with that alfresco application. Sorry, partly to do with this. I actually I don't see a problem with them having alfresco. I'll wait to see what the advice note is that Councillor Topberg's putting up, and I think we're quibbling about a few seats here and there. We've just approved Beaufort Street, where we've let them off with 50 grand's worth of, or 57 grand's worth of cash in lieu for parking. But this flags for me some other systemic issues, I think, in terms of alfresco, and perhaps it's a compliance monitoring, but perhaps it's also not. Perhaps it's rubbing up against the spirit of the alfresco policy we were trying to bring in place, which was to activate street frontages and those footpaths, etc. But I'll leave it at that, and I'll listen to Councillor Top.
You have an amendment?
I do,
yes.
Madam Mayor. Thank
Fantastic.
you. Proposed advice note 1.
Would you like to read it out so I can see if we have a seconder?
In relation to condition 1.4, the applicant has accepted the maximum number of patrons as proposed on the basis that the city has not required the payment of cash in lieu of car parking for the proposed 5-bay shortfall.
Advice note 5. Yes, we have 4 already, so this will be number 5.
You don't? There's 4 conditions. This is the first advice note.
You want to move it to number 1 and then make everything else?
No, this would be an advice note, not a condition. It would be advice note 1.
Through you, Mayor Cole, the last line.
Do I have a seconder for advice note number 5? Thank you, Councillor Castle. Councillor Toppelberg, do you wish to address it?
It is advice note 1, isn't it? There are no other proposed advice notes, or are they at the very end? Sorry, there are. Yes, correct. Attachment 4. Correct. It is advice note 5. Correct. Did I get a seconder? Sorry, I missed that.
Yes, you did. Councillor Castle.
Okay, so just a couple of comments. Just in relation to Councillor Harley's concern, if they can fit them, they can have 25 people at alfresco. It just means they then can't have any inside. This isn't limiting alfresco. This is the applicant saying, we don't want to pay any money and we are short, and the city saying, well, if you're going to push it further than what is here, then you may find just that under our assessment, because of the lack of car parking in the area, you may incur cash in lieu, and the applicant has acknowledged that and said, well, we don't want to pay cash in lieu, so we're happy with the condition. I think that it's important information to carry with the with the proposed approval, such that if in 2 years, 5 years, whatever it may be, someone else turns around and wants something else, that it's acknowledged that that was an agreed condition. It's not council being mean and not letting them have more people in there. It was an agreed acceptance by the applicant to remove, to accept the city's assessment that the car parking was sufficient for 25 people, regardless of where they sit. And I'm comfortable and think that it's important that we note that as an advice note.
Councillor Castle.
Through you, Mayor, at the risk of labouring this endlessly, once again, Councillor Topperberg has spoken about what I was going to raise, but I just wanted to clarify, following on from Councillor Harley's question, if the maximum number is 25 people and the applicant goes through the self-assessment process online for Alfresco, that could still be approved provided they deducted the number of people who are going to sit outside from the inside, which is what Councillor Topperberg is saying, right? So we wouldn't necessarily...
That is absolutely spot on.
So we wouldn't necessarily have a conflict between that Alfresco process and the approval that they have in place.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that's correct. And operationally, whilst the way that the applicant could deal with that online with the system that we've established is they could simply say, well, either no, there's no corresponding condition that prevents me from doing this, and themselves then just comply with the approval condition in the manner that both the Mayor and Councillor Topperberg have described and which you've summarised.
May I ask a question
Sure.
in regards to standing patrons? So, just to clarify, it says 25 patrons. So, what about, and that's seats? You know, so 25 patrons, 25 seats. Is there ability for them to have standing up bar patrons? I'm asking. I just feel like we're squeezing. We've just approved a great big business on Beaufort Street, and I actually don't care about Alfresco. I would want to encourage more Alfresco and not limit it in regards to the parking regime. I personally thought the whole point of the Alfresco policy was to free us up from all of that red tape. And I'm mindful that we've just approved a very big adaptive reuse on Beaufort Street. So my question is, if they had standing customers, how does that, or does it affect anything? Is this just in regards to tables and chairs and the number of bodies that are inside that facility and the number of bodies that are outside that facility?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the reference to, or the cap on 25 patrons refers to visitors to the site, be they inside sitting, inside standing, or in the associated Alfresco area.
Councillors, any further comments on the advice note issue? Councillor Goniszewski.
Look, I'm supportive of this. I think it is important to understand that our assessment on the impact of this change in use in terms of parking has been assessed on the basis of the number of patrons to the development, and that whilst and that essentially recognising that there is street parking and there will be on the substantive that there is some conditions in relation to cash in there in terms of bike parking, but yes, that I think it is important just to make clear that that the assessment has been undertaken in that regard, and that the assessment on the impact of parking, and therefore the no requirement to pay cash in lieu, I think, rather than a waiving of cash in lieu, is based on the number of patrons that are attending the premises at any one time.
Councillors, look, I'll just comment that it is a bit of an interesting one because there is a parklet immediately adjacent to this business, so that is in on public land, and I would think would not include 25. So visitors to this restaurant could likely dine in the parklet. The only issue being that I understand this business is keen to get a licence, and it's not going to be possible to licence the parklet. So correct me if I'm wrong, Director, but given that that's public land and it's adjacent to the restaurant, that they could have 25 patrons inside the restaurant and on their small area of Alfresco, but then they could actually have food service to other patrons in the parklet, although, as I say, alcohol service wouldn't be permitted.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that is correct. The limit on 25 patrons applies via the proposed condition only to the site itself and the associated alfresco, but does not extend to the existing parklet.
So I sort of feel that there is quite a bit of space for this business to provide at least food service. So I'm quite comfortable with the advice note on the basis that there is also the capacity to use the adjacent parklet. So I'll support the amendment. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? I declare votes against. Councillor Harley voting against. I declare it carried. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further comments? Councillor Toppelberg.
Question. Yeah. This is the first time that I've seen the provision of bicycle bays not just required as a condition, but actually as cash in lieu. Just checking whether that is covered under the policy in terms of potentially allowing the proponent to pay $800 over 5 years, or whether cash in lieu of bicycle parking is contemplated by the policy, and if not, on what basis we're imposing it as a condition rather than just requiring the payment or the installation of the bike racks.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I don't believe the policy specifically contemplates cash in lieu of bicycle facilities. Obviously, it certainly does for car parking facilities. In terms of the justification for the condition as drafted, staff are of the view that with only 2 dedicated car parking bays provided on site, that to support the application there was going to need to be an appropriate provision of bicycle facilities. That was raised with the applicant previously, who were happy to, or who prepared to accept a condition requiring the provision of bicycle facilities or a cash in lieu payment. In terms of the practicalities of having the applicant provide bicycle facilities in the near vicinity to the subject site, staff are of the view that opportunities were limited. There are some existing facilities in the immediate area. There's clearly a parklet. There's a desire for alfresco dining. There's I think a pizza shop next door that has motorbike delivery vehicles congregating near the entrance doors. There's a number of factors that basically mean that the provision of bicycle facilities in the immediate area to the cafe would be potentially problematic, and for that reason it was deemed more appropriate to simply accept a cash in lieu payment with the city to undertake the task of determining where the most appropriate location for those facilities would be. This was raised with the applicant, who had no objection.
Just on the final part of the question, which was, given that it's been referred to as cash in lieu, does it default that under the policy that they would then be entitled, if they so desired, to enter into a 5-year payment plan for the $800?
Through you, Mayor Cole, whilst not specifically contemplated under the policy, it would be staff's expectation that the payment would be made immediately in one lump sum.
Councillors? Councillor Toppelberg, if there being no further comment, do you wish to close debate? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Thank you. That concludes the development services items for this evening's meeting. So we'll move to engineering. We have 10.1, tender number 550 of 18, pruning of street trees using elevated work platforms. Moved Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Gondaszewski.
I'll be concise. I support the officer recommendation here. I guess I just wanted to make comment that in the notes we received some information around the potential costs for the second option, second placed tenderer, around the potential additional costs that we would incur through having to do traffic management, which was in addition to the tender. In my view, we are making an estimate when we put these things together of the number of trees we're going to prune, how big those trees are, what time is going to be undertaken, and so it should be possible for us to also incorporate that. There is a risk associated with all of those numbers and those uncertainties, so we should be able to incorporate these things into the decision-making process. I can accept that that is probably more difficult, but it should be something that we can factor into it as well. I note that it would require 17 frequencies of traffic management to make the costs effectively the same, although there's a degree of uncertainty how frequently it's likely to occur, but it would seem reasonable that would likely happen over the course of the year, and as such it would make this decision a lot easier because the financials would show that they're about the same and one of the tenders is better quality. Thanks.
Councillor Gonchevsky, any further comments, councillors? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Next item is 10.2, Axford Park upgrade, concept design and implementation of quick win works items. Councillor Castle moved, Councillor Hallett seconded.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I don't propose to talk very long on this. I'm supportive of the recommendation, obviously, excited to see this plan going ahead. I did just have one or two questions. The proposed quick wins and works that will happen in phase 1, will they have an impact on the current users of the site, mainly being the hawkers market? In terms of what will be the timing for that implementation? That's my first question.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole. We'll work around the hawkers market. We're ready to go on most of the items. They're pretty small and straightforward. The money's budgeted, so it won't impact on the market at all.
And the second question is, there's reference to the commemorative tree that's going to be planted as part of the Remembrance Day anniversary. Can you tell us exactly where that is going and how does that impact the plans at all?
Yeah, through your Mayor Cole. I believe it's shown on the plan on page 303. And it's item 10.
So it's right in the corner.
That's correct.
And what kind of tree will that be?
A ficus?
Yes.
I think through you, Michael, the best answer I can give is I will let council know what the type of tree is, if that's okay.
So that doesn't have any impact on any of the future phases of the plan either? No.
Through you, Michael, no, it doesn't. Correct. We're very careful the quick wins complement the concept plan if it goes ahead.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillors, any comments? Well, look, I'm excited. I think this is fantastic. It's really good to see. I think the money that we have on budget is going quite far when you look at the fact that there's 10 quick wins, including the relocation of the toilet block, and I know that's an Exelou and it's not bricks and mortar, which does make it a lot easier. But I think that things like the Fairfield Street raised plateau will be fantastic and really making a great connection between the two parts of the town centre. The footpath widenings, I think that the underplanting, given that that's going to work with the lighting that we have there, that we've got the activation of the hawkers market and further in the agenda we're looking at a potential further 2-year licence agreement subject to council's approval. I think this is a really nice steps forward. We're looking at trying to get support to extend the 40-kilometre zone through to Edinburgh Street and really make some nice small changes that I think when you think about some of the costs of things like $30,000 for one asphalt plateau, I think that this is actually quite a good amount to achieve with that amount of $165,000. I really love the concept. The concept put forward is the front yard of Mount Hawthorn, so it really speaks to the Mount Hawthorn community and reflects some of the elements that are very common and loved in Mount Hawthorn. And some of the things that are there, I think things like the swing seats, the expansion of the open space, the skatable terrace deck, so that we're trying to accommodate the teenagers and the kids that need that activity with something that actually looks really nice and is usable. And over time, having that veranda zone where we see development on that part of Hobart Street, yoga zone, etc. And one of the things that I also really like about this is the fact that it's got a very distinct memorial area, so it's really staying true to the Axford tradition and the Anzac Memorial, because that is a very special place for our community, not only on Anzac Day, but we're now looking at things like commemoration of armistice, etc. So it really respects that, and I think it actually really lifts that as a memorial park, but at the same time it's going to become a really great usable space over time. Look, this is currently on the estimates a roughly $2.2 million project, so it's not something that we're doing right here and now. But I think it's really good for council to have a vision for what this place can be, so that anything that we do now works towards achieving that vision over time. So whilst the money is not there to do it all now, I think that the quick wins and the steps towards it are happening, and we can continue to chip away at this project over time. So happy to have that future vision for the site. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the item. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. Takes us to 10.3. which was a late report, revised engineering policies relating to verge treatments and street trees. Can I have a mover? Councillor Toppelberg, seconded. Councillor Gonchevsky.
Happy to support it. Just a comment on something that I did notice. The crafting of the survey, I thought was, whilst the response rate was relatively low, I thought it was very clever in that the advocates for brick paving and concrete were split in two, because we asked for it twice. So whilst it only shows 7 and 5, it's actually 12 respondents out of the 20 that said they'd like to see more brick paving and concrete. But because we split it, I assume accidentally, between two different colours, we actually kept it low on the scale. So that was very, very well done by whoever crafted the survey. I will move the amendment on the yellow. That's in the name of Mayor Emma Cole, if I can get a seconder.
Councillor Gonchevsky as the seconder. Do you wish to second the amendment? Thank you.
That's fairly self-explanatory. It's just, it makes things clear and has the administration support, so happy to propose that.
Councillor Gonchevsky, do you wish to talk to the amendment? I do have a question. I just wanted to ask. Oh no, I'm happy with that. I think the question was to just ensure that the intent is that it's really just to provide further guidance and assistance to residents, rather than an ability to, have extra rules in a rule book separate to a policy. So I'm assured that is not the case, and this is really just about turning the guidelines in the policy into very user-friendly guidance for residents. Can I just clarify that's the case? CEO or Director?
That's correct, Mayor Cole. It is intended just to give guidance to residents who are not sure how to apply the policy.
Thank you. Any further comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. Yep, I think that was unanimous. Slow but unanimous. Okay, we're back to the substantive. Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Loden?
I have an amendment. I don't have it on a piece of paper, so apologies to my fellow councillors, and thanks to the Mayor for pointing out this issue. If you go to page 33 of that item, which is page 7 of 18 of the policy, 2.2.4, under point 1.4.3, I would like to amend the text of the last bullet point there which states any other item not listed above as approved by the Director of Engineering, to read instead any other item not listed above may be considered at the discretion of the Director of Engineering in accordance with the policy.
Do I have a seconder for the amendment? Seconded Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you, Mayor. The intent here is to reduce the red tape aspect here. We don't want a specific approval. We just want the Director to be able to provide discretion to allow other things. So I think this was originally an amendment I put forward last time round, and now I'm amending my own amendment. So well done to me.
Councillor Loden, just to point out that that form of words does actually feature in both policies. So we can deal with this one, but then we might have to come back and do it again. Are we in street trees or verge treatments at the moment? Sorry, I lost the page number you're referring to. That's
verge treatments.
Trees. Okay.
Well, should I do them both?
Well, I did write down, I think there are two. The clauses in verge treatments, it's 1.4.5, and in street trees the same wording appears under clause 9.2, part 7.
So I'm happy to support that if the seconder is also happy to support that.
Through you, Mayor Cole, at your discretion, and yes, if the seconder is happy to proceed on that basis, what I would recommend, council members, is that you treat those two proposed changes in the one amendment in exactly the same fashion as has been crafted in the amendment that you've just adopted. So the modification that council has just adopted to recommendation 2 introduces the option to add further changes. So the first change to policy 2.1.2, as the Mayor's identified, item 9.2, bracket 7, would become recommendation 2.3. The change that's then proposed also to the equivalent wording in policy 2.2.4 would appear as new recommendation 2.3. So they just be structured in exactly that way, but with slightly the text to be deleted and replaced would be as you've read out, Councillor Loden.
Clear as mud. I'm just going to interpret and I'll see whether I got this right. I think what the CEO is saying is that it would be a further 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4, which would refer separately to, in 2.3 it would refer to 1.4, clause 1.4.5, which is the verge treatments policy, and then you'd have a 2.4, which would refer to clause 9.2, part 7, street trees policy, but with the same wording change. Is that correct, CEO?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think so, and I only say that because I'm just frantically looking for
the other
clause
option.
9.2 part 7.
The other option is that we just proceed with verge trees and then that we have a second amendment come forward. That might be the more simple way to proceed at this stage. What do you think, Councillor Loden, as the mover of the amendment?
That's fine by me. I'm currently amending the verge policy, though not the tree one.
All right, so we'll proceed with this amendment and then perhaps we'll have a second amendment come forward. So we're talking about amending the verge verge policy at this point in time. So is there any further comments, Councillor Castle?
Well, I just have a question because in all of that, I missed what the actual wording change was. So could you please repeat what we are changing in those various clauses that you referred to? Or perhaps Councillor Loden can.
I can provide that. So on page... Now I'm lost. Jeez. Page 7, yeah. Page 7 of 18, 1.4.3. The last bullet point there says, any other item not listed above as approved by the Director of Engineering. And that would change to, any other item not listed above may be considered at the discretion of the Director of Engineering in accordance with the policy. So specifically removing that wording of approval, because then you need a formal approval process, and he can send someone an email and say, yes, that's fine.
So we're just going to do verge policy because it was getting a little bit difficult to, and we'll come back to street trees separately. So I'm sorry, it's just, yeah. Is there any further comment in relation to this amendment, which is just for verge policy, which I'm now calling verge tree policy, just to confuse it even more? On the verge policy, okay, I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? Declare it carried unanimously. Back to the substantive. Councillor Loden.
I'm just trying to find the specific part of the tree policy. 9IE. 18. Okay, so on page 18 of the agenda, 9IE reads, any other item not listed above as approved by the Director of Engineering. So delete that and replace it with any other item not listed above may be considered at the discretion of the Director of Engineering in accordance with the policy.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Toppelberg. Is there any debate on this item? Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Loden and Councillor Toppelberg? No? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further comments in relation to this item? Councillor Gontaszewski.
I note from the comments in the report that rope ladders may encourage street tree climbing, and therefore we should not allow them in street trees that are located under power lines. And I just was wondering if any other verge treatments or street tree attachments would also encourage tree climbing and therefore should not be allowed under. I think so. Yeah, and I guess I'm just. I shouldn't be facetious. I'm not. I think from my perspective, I have a question to the Director of Engineering in relation to the rope ladders on street trees under power lines, in terms of the specific risk or elevated risk that a rope ladder may pose, as opposed to any other feature on a verge or a feature of a particular tree that may also encourage street tree climbing.
Yeah, through you, Michael. I understand the point. Does it introduce an additional risk? It's under a power line. The policy originally said, so I think we're looking at the table in the report where I think it's 9.1v, where I think originally we suggested that it was platforms and structures that would introduce a risk under power lines. It was Western Power. You see the report refers to me in Western Power. They said they would also like to include rope ladders. I get the point that does that introduce an additional risk? But they were very nervous about anything being done under power lines, so that was one of their recommendations.
I don't support that. And particularly because when you prune a street tree, there's got to be at least 2 metre clearance between the tree and the power lines. So it remains open to council if they wish to move an amendment to deal with that one. I'm just trying to identify what clause number it is. Director, can you...
It's 9.1.v.
9.1.v.
Platform structures
platform
and rope
structures, and the additional words are and rope ladders are not permitted in street trees located under power lines. That's on page 13 of the agenda. Oh, sorry, page 26.
Look, I'll just speak on this. I think, obviously, part of the conversations that have occurred with varying agencies through the consultation process have led to some additional terminology and changes in the policy to ensure that risk is managed. I think one of those is that one of the considerations is that when installing street tree attachments to trees in proximity to Western Power infrastructure, it is recommended to contact Western Power to determine appropriate clearances. I would suggest if Western Power had additional clearance over and above what we're currently pruning, that would be something we need to address separately. And from my perspective, I I accept that a platform or structure may, could intrude into the clearance around power lines potentially. But I just personally find it difficult to suggest that a rope ladder may encourage rogue street tree climbing into the clearance zone under a Western power line over and above any other assistance that someone would also, need to have in terms of actually climbing up the ladder and then beyond into the tree. So I don't feel as though we should be blaming the rope ladders in this instance. And so with that in mind, I would like to propose an amendment to the street tree, this is the guidelines of the policy, hold on. The guidelines and policy procedures relating to street trees policy 2.1.2, section 9.1 to remove the reference to rope ladders.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Castle. Councillor Gonchevsky, do you wish to speak to the amendment? I feel you have said everything. Councillor Castle.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, I agree. It seems a bit strange that a rope ladder in particular would allow a child, perhaps, to then venture into the zone above the tree that is into the clearance zone. But I do have a question. In the meeting with Western Power, was the context of that simply to get their advice, or does that have implications for our insurance and risk position if we don't follow their advice on that?
So you, Michael. The meeting was a response to the consultation. We contacted them, said it was a consultation, so they wanted to come and discuss. They were very supportive. They didn't want to block any of the changes. They're obviously quite nervous about things happening under infrastructure like live power lines. I don't believe, LGIS have seen our risk assessments and not made comments specifically about that item, so I don't think that changes that position at all.
Councillors, we're on the amendment to remove the wording and rope ladders. Further comment? I'll comment and say that I think that, again, when you start to talk to risk-adverse, potentially you start to move into that risk-averse space, you really just need to stand back and look at it again clearly. We have plenty of rope ladders in swings under power lines. We have significant clearance zones between the tree canopy and the power lines, and I think that this is just adding rules back into a policy that we're really strongly trying to say that provided that things are being done in a safe manner, which I believe that people who are putting equipment into street trees being primarily there to be used by the children would be making pretty safe decisions about how that's used, and it is about providing that onus back to residents, and that was the intent of the policy change, and I'm very keen to stay as true to that as possible. So I fully support this amendment. Councillors, any further comments? We'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Declare it carried. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further comments on the changes? Councillor Gonchevsky.
I think overall this is a fantastic outcome, and it's been a good process. I guess I just wanted to make some commentary on the questions in the consultation as well. I think that this is just, I note the perhaps repetition in relation to what Councillor Toppelberg said, but more than that, I think that it is really important when we do a consultation to ensure that we are asking questions that are balanced and aren't necessarily leading. I don't feel that this, crossed the line, but I think that one of the outcomes of a community and public consultation is also to ask the community if there's anything that we have not considered or we've missed. And so I think that one of the things that potentially was missed here was around, the change, and if there were any actual, risks that the community perceived, or that there was any other issues with the policy change that the community perceived. So, I think that it is really important when we do talk to our community in these sort of surveys where we're setting the structure, that we establish the surveys to allow them to gather data from the full spectrum of responses. So I think that we are doing really well, but I think that this is just something I wanted to draw attention to so that we can make sure that in future we consider that fair and balanced approach to our consultations.
Thank you, Councillor Gondaszewski. Are there any further comments? I've just been told I can speak again by the CEO under the standing orders, so I just want to say that I'm really proud of our council for taking this step. It does, when you think about a few swings or a garden bed on a verge, it might not seem like a big deal, but this has the potential to rock the local government world, where you have had councils remove fruit trees on verges to say, no, your garden bed is not permitted on the verge, take that swing down. We faced it ourselves, which really pushed this issue. And I think that the small things can make a big difference to life in neighbourhoods, and to be able to really make the most of verges and street trees, and to let people do what they have been wanting to do. And you've had this widely across our community, the Christmas tree decorations, the kids playing out on the streets, people wanting to grow their veggies, and as we densify, this is just going to become more and more important to the City of Vincent. So while it might seem like a small thing, I'm actually really proud of our council in taking this step forward, and I think that I invite all other local governments now to come and have a look at our policy and to consider taking this step themselves. So well done, Vincent Council, and thank you to the staff for letting it happen. If there's no further comment, I'll put the item. All those in favour? Declare it carried unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to corporate services, and we have item 11.2, report from Audit Committee meeting of the 17th of July 2018. Chair, do you wish to move the item? Thank you, Councillor Loden. Seconded by Councillor Toppelberg. Got there first. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a great privilege to have the opportunity to recommend this to Council. In summary of the audit report there's 3 items that were considered. Updating the terms of reference of the Audit Committee, which was done to bring us in line with the new local government legislation. The Audit Management Letter, which provides feedback on the 8 findings of the recent audit that was undertaken. I note in there were 7 moderate findings and 1 significant one. During the Audit Committee, we did scrutinise that a bit and specifically determined that administration had put in specific management controls around that significant risk that is a manual process currently until such time as a change to the system can be made to actually close this out. All those are identified in the audit log as well, which is the 3rd item there. I also note that progressively, slowly but surely, we're whittling away on those audit logs as well. There were quite a large number of those outstanding when I first came onto this committee 3 years ago. And slowly but surely, our administration is chipping away and closing those all out. And hopefully we'll get to a point in time where we've actually closed them all out prior to the next audit coming into place. So this has my full endorsement.
Thank you, Councillor Loden. Councillor Toppelberg, do you wish to speak? Councillor Gondaszewski? Councillors? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. It takes us to community engagement. And tonight we have 1 item remaining, and that's 12.2, the City of Vincent Art Development Action Plan 2018 to 2020. Moved by Councillor Murphy, Chair of the Arts Committee, seconded by Councillor Fotakis, Arts Committee member. Go for it, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you for indulging me. As promised, I have prepared a speech to, razz everyone up. Just over a year ago, this council endorsed our current arts priorities, which included our ambitious mission to become the arts capital of Perth. Today, this magnificent document we see before us is a set of great ideas and actionable items, charting our course over the next 2 years towards realising this mission. Earlier this year, after some strong, passionate debate, our Arts Advisory Group, the AAG, came to the consensus that in order to truly become the arts capital of Perth, they wanted a comprehensive 5-year art strategy to be completed by the city over and above what the city had initially planned. This is not that document. This is an interim action plan that lays out the foundations for the final vision to truly come alive in a proper art strategy to be developed over the coming 2 years. It was decided we could tackle this action plan in-house and began with the Imagine Vincent data. In the 2,000-odd submissions we received during last year's Imagine Vincent engagement campaign, the word art featured in 400 of them, and this data helped set the scene for this action plan, laying the foundations for a big creative future for this city. The document you now see in front of us is comprised of an updated mission and five theme areas: innovation, support, creative economy, activation and connection. Firstly, we are proposing an extended vision for the arts in the city, which is to embed creativity in everything we do to make Vincent the arts capital of Perth. We added to this as we wanted something more than a pure aspiration statement. We wanted to add a bit of how, not just what. It's still an aspirational statement, but gives us all a little bit more buy-in and the arts a greater focus within and without our organisation. We also have innovation, which talks about opening ourselves to our local and broader contemporary arts community through major works and percent for art review. Support, which is about opening ourselves up to our local arts and emerging artist community and looking at ways we can further support them through marketing and co-working spaces. Creative economy, which is looking into building on attracting the creative economy around our creative community, including our own business, the city. Activation, a whole raft of arts activation ideas, including lending out our art collection to developing community arts projects and jazz precincts. Connection is around further connecting with our arts community and building a proper 5-year strategy. The AAG wanted to make sure that this action plan spoke to and catered for each of the 3 key segments of our arts community as we currently see it. 1, grassroots community arts development, our community. 2, our local and emerging arts workers, and 3, professional contemporary artists in Vincent and beyond. Each segment needs to work in order to produce a pathway for our artists' growth and development. To contribute to the development of our arts culture and artistic community, it starts with reaching out to and involving our community at a grassroots level. Community arts. And what better way to engage our community than through initiatives such as our Guerrilla Arts campaign to encourage all our people to engage in the practice of art and making the public realm theirs. A retrospective reward program for people contributing arts in the public realm through their own front yards, business windows, or potentially with chalk on the pavement, yarn on the lampposts, local buskers performing in our town centres and parks, and other random acts of arty goodness the creative minds of our city can conjure up. Secondly, we want to open up and provide real art opportunities for our local and aspiring artists, such as art co-working spaces, percent for art projects, posts on a dedicated art Instagram, roaming artwork projects and an urban art walk. And thirdly, building significant contemporary art projects such as a significant public entry statement, celebrating our best artists and attracting great artists to contribute their creativity to our city while signalling to the rest of Perth and visitors from abroad that Vincent is indeed serious about our art and our creativity. In a world of tech and connectivity, creativity is emerging as one of the forecast fastest growing industry in the developed world. Here in the city of Vincent, we have some of the most talented artists in Perth: visual artists, designers, musicians, dancers, graph artists, painters, sculptors, film producers, animation artists and more. We have a strong history of creativity with artists attracted to Vincent's strong sense of community, an inspired urban inner city environment and a centralised location allowing for collaboration. By harnessing our creativity, supporting and inspiring our creatives that build on the vibrancy and expressiveness of our city cultural life, attracting even more creative energy, arts practitioners and creative businesses to further support and develop our creative community and economy, co-working spaces, exhibition spaces, production houses, venues, theatres, public performance spaces, bright minds exploring, reflecting and altering our environment, works which explore what it is to be human, projects which challenge us, pushing out our own collective potential through their expression and energy. I want to acknowledge our Arts Advisory Group who have all strongly contributed to this 2-year action plan, including fellow councillor Joe Fotakis. I would also like to personally thank Michael Quirk for creating the space for this to be developed internally in a collaborative, contemporary fashion. And extra special thanks to Tegan and Rosalind, who have put in a huge effort in pulling it all together with the Arts Advisory Group every step of the way, in-house without consultants. The city has a clear and planned out action plan for the next 2 years. Instead of sitting around twiddling our thumbs doing another round of consultation to deliver another plan in 18 months, we can pick all the low-level fruit whilst we develop our high-level 5-year strategy that will take us to where being the arts capital of Perth is no longer aspirational but in fact an achievable reality. I hope you support this item tonight. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Councillor Jimmy Murphy, Chair of the Arts Advisory Group. That was quite spectacular. Councillor Fotakis.
Well, I can't follow that, but I'd like to actually add a quote from Barack Obama. So one of my favourite leaders to quote. And his words are, if you try to suppress the arts, then you're suppressing the deepest dreams and aspirations of a people. So I think that sort of speaks a lot to why, as a community, Vincent, we're so dedicated to supporting and championing the arts. I think it really speaks to how much energy and really commitment that we have to supporting our community to excel in so many ways. So I hope fellow councillors support the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fotakis. That was a beautiful quote. Any further comments? Councillor Gonchevsky.
I just want to make mention of the approach here. I think this is actually really good, and I think it's this great balance of action and plan, and I really applaud the decision made to recognise that if we actually want to deliver on our goals, we need to have a strategic approach, but that we need to, we can't just do that. We have to actually be doing some doing along the way. And so I think that at the end of the day, the approach is rigorous, but the actions are, vigorous or something. But I think that essentially it's actually this really good balance going forwards. And I think we could look at it for other interim planning documents along the way.
Thank you, Councillor Gonchevsky. Councillors? Well, look, I'd just like to add to say congratulations to the Arts Advisory Group, because I think this is really demonstrating where it's working in terms of you have community members that are highly skilled, they're passionate about where they live, they're prepared to come and spend their, I don't know if it's a Monday or Wednesday night, Thursday night at the City of Vincent, talking about arts, talking about making improvements in their community. They do this as volunteers, and that they do it with our councillors Jimmy and Joe, and with our staff. And I was really impressed with the document that's been brought forward. It hasn't been done by consultants, it's been done absolutely in-house, and it's been done by using the expertise offered to us by our community members on the Arts Committee that have that inherent in their professional background, but also through a willingness to provide and offer that to the City of Vincent because of that passion. So I was really impressed that this had resulted in this interim plan, and I think that when you look at the content, it's really good. It's a beautiful looking document, but it delivers on the content, and I think that ability to diversify in the arts, it's not just wall murals, we're actually talking about music precincts, we're talking about sculpture, we're just, it's actually really broadening our focus of the arts in Vincent, and I think that that's something that the community really got behind through the Imagine Vincent conversation, and it's really great to see the comment coming through that process being used to drive things like an action plan in arts, because the material was given to us by our community during that conversation, and we're using it, we're using our arts committee, and we've come up with this great plan. So congratulations to the Arts Committee. It's a very successful document, I think, and should be proud. Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the item. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Yeah. As if it wasn't going to be. That concludes the items for this evening other than our confidential items. So if I could have a mover and seconder to go behind closed doors. Thank you. Move Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Fotakis, and we'll say good night to those people who've joined us on the live stream. Oh yes, we do need to vote. Can I have a vote on the moving behind closed doors? Yes, thank you.